Hey guys, welcome back to Chris and Retro. Um, Tonight I've got a subject matter. It's related to stigma, but it's more about some of the obligation that we have for those of us in recovery as we walk this journey that sometimes can be a little difficult. And I'm learning these lessons as I go. So if you haven't noticed, they're following a lot of similar themes. But I'm finding as I've been kind of revitalized my recovery journey, and I've gone back to some of the basics relative to accountability. And I tell you, as much craziness has been going on in our life, I tell you, not looking over my shoulder with my decisions has been just such a freaking relief. And really just staying focused on the things that matter to me. How I start my day is very prescriptive. How I manage my day, very prescriptive. And that predictability has allowed me to deal with some of the other things I was working through. And it allows me to deal with sadness and hurts and fears and things like that in a much more healthy way. So I'm thankful for some of the season we're in. Some of it I could do without, but it is what it is. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I've learned through this season related to stigma and our obligation as people in recovery. But I got an exciting announcement for you that I'm excited about it, and you may not know who he is yet, but you will. On Sunday at 8 p.m., I'm going to be doing an interview with Jeff. He goes on by Instagram, Jeff_Oley, Olley, I believe. And Jeff, I was introduced to Jeff by a friend of mine, Brian, I think 2 years ago or so. He's a, as I understand it, and we'll learn more about him, but he's a high-end physical trainer for some prestigious people. He got in a terrible motorcycle accident. And so you can imagine there's his livelihood, and he's really had a remarkable recovery and is right back to where he was at, it seems. So we're going to learn a lot about Jeff, but I've had some interaction with Jeff when in that motorcycle crash, because my friend Brian had asked me just to randomly reach out to him with some encouraging words. And I did, and I didn't know him. I just left a message for him saying I knew of him through Brian, and I wanted him to stay focused on what mattered and just take it one day at a time and that type of thing. And all this time later, we've connected, and I found him to be a pretty remarkable human being. So I'm excited to have him on the show and be another flavor of recovery. This is not a drug addiction or alcohol addiction thing. This is somebody that their livelihood almost was taken through a motorcycle accident. And his attitude, I think, is pretty astounding. So I think you guys will really enjoy it. And I'm excited to have him on. And I'm looking forward to seeing what his message is. Before tonight's video, let's talk about what I want to get on here about. Really, I've labeled it sort of education, but it really does boil down to stigma. And I tell you, I've had some new understanding of that whole thing. Now, my perspective on stigma has been book knowledge based, personal experience based, and personal experience through the lens of other people that I love. And I've seen stigma, and it really is a real thing. Now, I'm not one of the ones that gets hung up on what word you use with me. You can call me a drunk, an alcoholic, scumbag, whatever you want. I don't care. The labels don't bother me. If you call me a girl, I'm probably going to clap back a little bit just because you're probably doing it in a negative connotation just to irritate me. I like girls. I like my girls. I love my daughters. I love Sam. But I know where you're getting at when you're trying to minimize me as a man by doing stuff like that. Those are things you're going to get in my mouth. But, names related to things that I actually have been, I'm good with it. But, a lot of people do worry about stigma that way, and it does bucket people in certain ways. So I can understand why they go that way. And Shatterproof, the organization that I volunteer for, very much is about how we've got to be more careful with our language. And I understand their perspective. I'm just saying, for me personally, I don't get offended by that. But in my journey, I've seen some pretty crazy things related to stigma. And one of the big ones has been in Sam's life and in my life. As soon as they look at your chart or if they look at your history, there's implications. So if you're a female with a drug addiction history and you've been hospitalized and you've had multiple rehabs and you've had some slip-ups along the way, good luck getting a primary care physician. Good luck. And all you primary care physicians that are watching, or any people in the medical community, don't try to argue with me on this, because it's nonsense. Because we spent 3 years trying to get her a primary care physician and finally got one that would stick by her side. We had one that was sort of dabbling in her life, but wasn't really committed to solving any of her medical problems that had come about. And as a result, that turned into even further mental health issues. So, the first thing is just really, in this medical community, there is a lot of stigma, a lot of it. And what's baffling about that is, if statistically, many struggle with addiction themselves. You think about the high stress work of being a nurse or an ambulance driver or law enforcement officer or whatever. If you look at those first responders alone, the amount of substance abuse and domestic violence incidences and everything else are pretty high. And so there's some hypocrisy there, but when you're a patient coming in to present, or if you're in a situation where your addiction is obvious and it's causing some issues, stigma will hold to you for your life with that if you don't manage it and stand up for yourself. So that's one area. You know, in interpersonal interactions, you know, for me, one of the things I found is limitations in my professional career. Now I'm fortunate. I have a company that's been unbelievably gracious with me. They know exactly what's going on in my background. My supervisor, who's the CEO of the company, he is an outstanding human being. He was more than willing to hear about what's going on, so that we have an open and honest relationship. I don't overwhelm him with it, but I let him know this is the situation I'm dealing with this week, and he's cool with it because I overperform in other areas. So I make sure that I dedicate my time and take it super seriously. And when something's coming up, I make sure I have a good conversation with him, and he's great with it. So I'm fortunate in that space, but to get to that place with work, it's been very difficult to get it. What's interesting is that even though I worked as a vice president for a large treatment provider here in Western New York, I experienced it at that job as well. It's a treatment provider. Now, here's another little nuance to that. Recently, with that same treatment provider, I was going back through the evaluation process to get my license back. Now, I've had my license gone for 7 years. And I'm now eligible to go get an evaluation done by the state to give me a determination whether I can go take the test or not to get my license back. A lot of language there, but there's a lot of qualifiers for it. And part of that, I have to go through a treatment program to have that submitted from them. And so I was there doing that work. As things started to fall apart with Sam's situation, we had other agencies had to get involved with some circumstances. And as I was getting ready to do the implementation of whatever recommendation they had for me to go forward for getting my license, they closed my chart and removed me, saying there was a conflict of interest because I serve on the Alternative to Incarceration Board here in Ontario County. And on that board are the DA and several county executives and several leaders within treatment and that type of thing. And there was a conflict of interest there is what they determined, even though they knew this for the months before that. Now all of a sudden they changed it. And the stigma related to my circumstances in my home with Sam led to that. Now I'm still on that board. They've not removed me. I'm still an active participant in it. But the agency that was supposedly that I had to go through to get my license back decided to do this. That was stigma. There's no two ways about it. And I know it was because the CEO of that agency out of nowhere reached out to me days later asking me to go for coffee, which literally never happens. So I thought that was odd. And it tipped their hand. So I'm sharing all this to let you know that it presents itself in different ways, and we do have an obligation in terms of how we deal with it. And so this would be a suggestion. I believe in having these conversations open and honest about my circumstance and speak from my circumstance. Now, I take some liberties with Sam just because I really feel like we're one unit in this whole thing. And she's been good about that, doesn't care. And she talks about my story as well. It's just really us kind of collaborating to figure out how we get this message out. And even when we're struggling, we still believe that that's, the path of most effectiveness is to make sure that we're sharing our struggles with others so that we can relate to them and hopefully find hope and help in each other in this fellow traveler notion. But we also, in those circumstances, are part of our job is to educate related to stigma. And I was talking to somebody who was a county worker here today, and I was shocked that what I shared with this person was shocking to them. I shared with them the difficulty for somebody with drug addiction history, a significant drug addicted history it is to even get a physician to pay attention to a serious calamity. I explained that with University of Rochester and Rochester General Hospital and all these large facilities around here with treatment providers everywhere, I had to call on a medical director in Philadelphia using a friend of mine that's a supplier of ours in my business to tell me who this medical director was that would be sensitive to Sam's condition. I took a picture of what the condition was, sent it to him. He made a diagnosis over the phone, called the University of Rochester physicians and said, you need to get on this way, and told him how to do it. Lo and behold, they listened to him. We got the treatment we needed and started to settle in her circumstance quickly. This is about 2 years ago. So it took us going through extraordinary lengths just to get basic medical care. When I was sharing that story, this person was shocked that actually happened. And this person is heavily involved with people that have addiction problems, but on the punitive side of things and not on the understanding side of things. The other area that I felt compelled to educate is that when people are in active use, there are a lot of events that happen. And what we do from a system perspective is we look at them saying, you're a screw up. Hey, look at this sentence. Look at this one. Look at this one. Look at this. You did 5 things all in a row. And what I encourage this individual to say is when you're looking at an addict, you have to look at the duration of it. How long was this going on? Well, it was going on a couple months. Exactly. It wasn't going on for 2-3 years. It was going on for a couple months because their addiction had taken hold. And it was really about the addiction and not the individual events within that moment that was going on. And so what you have to get under control is whatever mental health condition drove that person to that point that they started using again, and also recognize that those events are all tied together. If somebody leaves a psychiatric ward and goes out in the street, they're going to have some grace given to them. But yet the disability of substance use disorder, which if you go for employment now and somebody says, do you have a disability or not? The very first one on there is alcoholism, drug addiction, or drug substance use disorder, but not presently using. Have you had a history of that? That's one of the disabilities that's on that list. And that's something that we should recognize when these circumstances, it very much is a disability. So, if we have cancer and we do something based on our cancer and we fall out in a car, we're not going to get a criminal charge for that. I'm not suggesting drunk driving or anything else like that is good or should be done in any capacity. I'm just saying that other diseases get special dispensation where this does not. So we have to educate. Even in our most serious times where we're being penalized, we should still be proponents of our circumstance and educate. At the same time, we have to be rigorous and serious about our own recovery and making sure that we stay on track. So there's really three main categories I think that we have opportunity to educate. One is active addicts, or those that I would say active addicts is one category. So anybody that's really struggling, trying to get out of it, we can educate on ways and share ways and tips and things like that in terms of what we found to be true and what helped us get beyond our rough seasons. The second one is the recovery community. So those that really just need to be bolstered and that commiserating to say, I tried this and didn't work. And what about this? And that really is useful. And that's the fellow traveler notion. But also in that same vein is the preventative measure relative to kids. I shared, I think it was 3 students a day or something. I forget what the number was, but there's a stat I shared on TikTok that about youth going back to school and the exposure they have and how many are overdosing on fentanyl. It's a serious problem. And so, this prevention message, that's also the other area where we're obligated to educate. We have things we can control, things we cannot. The things we cannot, we got to set aside. But the things we control, some of those things are sharing our story and educating people around us so we can get rid of the stigma that says, you're bad, you're a junkie, I don't know what to do with you, let me throw you out. Stand for yourself in a healthy way that says, this is the actuality. Let me help you understand what it is that we're going through. And then the next thing is the community at large. And the community at large is everything from Child Protective Services to law enforcement to doctors, nurses, your brothers, your sisters, your people at the store, helping them understand what addiction actually is. Now, I am not exonerating criminal offenses or any other offenses that happen when you're in active use. I'm not saying it's okay to do that stuff, and I'm certainly not trying to whitewash all that. All I'm saying is that there is a reason why things happen like they do, and they may not be the way that you're thinking of them. And so we can reframe people to help them at least have a better understanding of because if we don't understand what addiction actually is, how is it that we're building solutions to solve the problem when we don't even understand the core issue or even what it feels or looks like and why it happens the way it does? By educating people, we can help them understand more and try to help them find innovative ways to solve problems related to addiction and the issues it causes homes. We do not have to bare our souls everywhere we go. We don't have to be subservient to every single person. But I feel like there's victory in our ability to have conversations with people and at least reframe their thinking about what it is they think they're dealing with. If you've got somebody that's going to be conversational, and I actually had somebody that was really good, I thought fair in the conversation today, even though we weren't really in agreement in all of it. That fair conversation allowed me, I said, I felt like I'm being heard for the first time. And he says, well, I'm not against you. And I said, well, it felt like you and the county was against my family, and I want my family together, period. I want Sam to get better, and I want her to come home. I want to stay strong. I want my kids to have their mom back. I want everything to settle in the way it once was. That's what I'm looking for. And what I don't want is have a system to say, no, that can't happen. What I want is to say, it can happen, but you have to go through these gates to make that happen. And I think that we should realize that in our life, we create environments that cause those types of things to happen. And we should accept that so long as we're not being put aside for our addiction. I hope this makes sense, guys. It made sense to me in my head, but I've been running into a lot of situations lately where my ability and willingness to share the story is opening people's eyes slightly. I talked last night about going to the Scotty B overdose awareness day thing. And, low participation, but what wasn't there was the general community. I mean, the general community is just thinking, if I just close my eyes and talk real loud to turn up the music, then I don't have to deal with this. Not true. It's here, man. It's not going anywhere. So, pushing yourself out of the scene doesn't mean it's not going to come towards you. It definitely is coming towards you, and it's getting worse. Statistically, I know that it said it was going down, but it's still 103,000 overdose deaths this year. Okay, that's $13,000 more. $13,000 more than what we saw in 2022. So it's not good, even though it went down a little. Guys, I appreciate you. I'm thankful that you tuned in the show tonight. Again, Sunday night, I'm really excited about my guest. I hope that you are too. I hope you really tune in on that one. Make sure you check him out. He's got his own podcast. We'll learn all about that when we get on there. But I'm thankful for you guys participating in this. I hope this makes sense to you tonight. It really comes back to helping us break stigma with education. When you're having these conversations with people, don't get in arguments with people. Just help reframe their thinking so they can have a different perspective. Always make sure the language you're using is from my standpoint, my viewpoint. This is what I see. That way it's not you saying, you're wrong, you're what, blah, blah, blah. That's not the way to do it. Just say, look, that from our standpoint, this is how we see things. Where's the middle ground here? I think that's a more effective way to have conversations than it is to go jumping down people's throat, especially when your freedom or your desires for your future happen to be in their hands. But many people will listen to you if you handle the conversation correctly. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. I'd really like to get the likes and the subscribes up a lot more than where we currently are. Make your comments if there's anything in here you want to add to the discussion. Would appreciate that. And between now and the next time we talk, I'm going to do everything I can to stay out of trouble. It seems to be working so far. I hope you do too.